What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Sunday, February 26th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. What's up, guys? Okay, so we got a pretty awesome slate here tonight. We have a 5-game NBA slate. I love these picks. I love this slate. I wasn't feeling the slate yesterday. Then it showed my picks were off. But I love this slate here tonight. So at the point guard position, I like Russell Westbrook from the LA Clippers playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. So Russell Westbrook has averaged 37.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. But now he's projected at 41.2 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.8 times value. He's only 7,100 DraftKings salary and 500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230 points scored in this game, and Russell Westbrook scored 45 fantasy points last game, playing 39 minutes. So he was out for a couple games. Let's just take a look at Russell Westbrook. Let's see how many games he missed. So he missed 4 games, but he came back the last game on the 24th. So this is not a back-to-back. He came back and he played 39 minutes and scored 45 fantasy points. So Russell Westbrook, I don't think the price has caught up to his potential production here. And he played 39 minutes, so if we can get Russell Westbrook for 35 plus minutes at 7,100 DraftKings salary, he's got easy 50 plus fantasy point upside, high scoring game, and a fantastic matchup. So I like Russell Westbrook here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, so I got a couple of options here, value plays at the shooting guard position. So the first guy is more of a gamble. This is going to be a hit or miss pick, I think, but I think he's got some pretty good upside in this game. So take a look at Malik Monk from the Sacramento Kings playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 7th worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Malik Monk, he's averaged 24.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. So he's projected at 24 fantasy points here tonight. I think he can score 26 fantasy points or more in this matchup and get you over 5 times value. He's only 5,000 DraftKings salary. He's 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 241 points scored in this game, so you got a super high scoring game here and a great matchup. Now, Malik Monk has scored 59 and 22 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 40 and 20 minutes. So it was an overtime game, that last game where he played 40 minutes, scored 59 fantasy points. But my thinking here is they definitely bumped his salary up. Let's just see Malik Monk. I just want to take a look at his salary. You can see his the salary log here of these games. So he was 4,852. I guess he hasn't been bumped up too much. He was 4,300 earlier in the season, but now he's got a looks like a more solidified role here. So Malik Monk played 40 minutes in an overtime game yesterday. If we can get him for 25 minutes or more, he's averaging 1.11 fantasy points per minute. So I like Malik Monk as a high risk, high reward option here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, now another shooting guard that I like, and this is probably my preferred pick here if you were going to go with one or the other. I like Cam Reddish from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Houston Rockets, who have the 4th worst defense overall, give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Now, Cam Reddish has averaged 15.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He's projected at 22.8 fantasy points here tonight, which seems totally reasonable, and that's 5.5 times value because he's only $4,100 DraftKings salary. Now, he is $1,300 more on FanDuel, so I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 232.5 points scored in this game, and Cam Reddish has scored 38, 25, and 18 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 32, and 18 minutes. So I like to see that his minutes and his production have been trending up for the last 3 games, and he's played 2 solid 32 and 34 minute games the last 2 games. So hopefully we can get Cam Reddish for 25 minutes or more. He's averaging 0.73 fantasy points per minute, so not as productive each minute he's on the court as Malik Monk, but he comes at a pretty big discount here. And if he can score 25 to 38 fantasy points like his last 2 games, in this game here tonight, in a good matchup, in what should be a fast-paced game, which I think it will be. So I like Cam Reddish here versus the Houston Rockets. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won. And then we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. So I had said always play Paul George at $8,500 or less. He's at $8,300 on DraftKings. And when I say that, I just mean if he's not on a back-to-back, and if he's got a middle-of-the-road matchup or better, I think he's a solid play at $8,500 or less. His salary, I think, will eventually get close to $9K. But right now, I still like Paul George from the LA Clippers playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing small forwards, but Paul George has averaged 42.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He's projected at 46.5 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.6 times value. He's $8,300 DraftKings salary, $700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 230 points scored in this game, and Paul George has scored 60, 43, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 40, 36, and 31 minutes. So he continues to produce game after game. It's hard for him to break your lineup, and he certainly can make your lineup. He's got easy 50-plus fantasy point upside if he gets going. So I like Paul George here versus the Denver Nuggets. Now, I also like Harrison Barnes from the Sacramento Kings playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 7th worst defense overall, middle-of-the-pack defending opposing small forwards, also eligible at the power forward position. Harrison Barnes has averaged 25 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He's projected at 26.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's only $4,900 DraftKings salary and the same price on FanDuel. So I love that price on both sites. It looks like an excellent FanDuel price. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 241 points scored in this game. So this could be a good game to stack. A lot of value in this game. So Harrison Barnes has scored 26, 24, and 14 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 40, 23, and 35 minutes. So he's getting the minutes. His production has been ramping up the last 3 games. So that's a trend that you want to play. And if this guy can go out there and put a good game together, he's got 30 plus fantasy point upside, can get you over 6 times value. I wouldn't expect a monster game from him. And of course, every once in a while, he'll go out there and put up a dud. But I like Harrison Barnes here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. But for even less money than Harrison Barnes, and a pick that I like even more, is Luguentz Dort from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Sacramento Kings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. So Luguentz Dort has averaged 25.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 26.4 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.7 times value. He's 4,600 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel, so I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 241 points scored in this game. Luguentz Dort has scored 37, 36, and 26 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 36, 36, and 24 minutes. So those are strong numbers coming from a guy that's only 4,600 DraftKings salary. And let's take a look. I haven't been looking at the player versus team history up until just now. Just remembered it. I normally do that on each player. So Luguentz Dort has scored 25, 32, and 36 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Kings. So that bodes well for him as well. Everything is lining up for this to be a fantastic DraftKings play. Probably one of my favorite plays on the slate on DraftKings. So I like Luguentz Dort here versus the Sacramento Kings. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. So here's a super cheap value play. Take a look at Kenrich Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Sacramento Kings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, give up the second most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Kenrich Williams has averaged 19.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 13% usage rate. Now he's projected at 22.8 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 6 times value. He's only 3,800 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 241 points scored in this game. We mentioned this was going to be a good game to stack. A lot of value in this game. High scoring game, good matchups, fast-paced game. This is a fantasy dream here. So Kenrich Williams has scored 21, 27, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 27, 28, and 18 minutes. So last 2 games, playing 27 and 28 minutes. That is a lot of minutes for a guy who is averaging 0.87 fantasy points per minute, and he's only 3,800 DraftKings salary. Can get you over 5 times value even if he only scores his season average in points. So I think he's just underpriced on DraftKings. So I like Kenrich Williams here versus the Sacramento Kings. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, moving on to the center position. Actually, let me check that power forward position. I feel like I had one more pick. No, I didn't. Okay, let's go back to the center position here. So moving on to the center position, I like Rudy Gobert from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Golden State Warriors, who have the 8th worst defense overall, middle of the pack defending opposing centers. Rudy Gobert has averaged 33.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. Now he's projected at 36.5 fantasy points here tonight, and that is 4.7 times value, so he's going to need about 40 fantasy points or more. 39 to 40 fantasy points or more to get you 5 times value or more. He's 7,700 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 234 points scored in this game. Now, Rudy Gobert has been playing well. He scored 39, 49, and 40 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 35, and 29 minutes. It's not a back-to-back. It's a pretty decent matchup here. Pretty high scoring game. So I like Rudy Gobert, who has scored 23, 45, and 42 fantasy points in his last 3 games here versus the Golden State Warriors. Okay, so this next center pick I think is super interesting here. He is on a back-to-back, and I did check his scoring log, and I checked the previous back-to-backs. Not fantastic, but it's a small sample size. Let's just look at it real quick. So if you go to Jacob Piotr here, his scoring log, let's take a look at his last back-to-backs. It was the 25th and the 26th. He played 22 and 22 minutes, scored 22 and 17 or 23 and 17 fantasy points. So not a lot of minutes that previous back-to-back, but it does look like he wasn't playing a lot of minutes. He was only playing in the 20s of minutes for a stretch of like 5 games here. So that might not have had anything to do with the back-to-back. Not a lot of data on the back-to-back, because the other one that previous in the season, he played 32 minutes and scored 51.5 fantasy points in the first game. And it looks like he didn't play in the second game of the back-to-back. But this is way earlier in the season, so I'd have to go back and look to see what that situation was. Maybe it was like some type of injury that he was resting or something, just that game, on top of being a back-to-back. Anyways, I'm not worried about it. Let's go back to Jacob Piotr from the Toronto Raptors playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have a good defense and they're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. But Jacob Piotr has averaged 31.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game. So right off the bat, I'm saying this guy averaging 31.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of only 26 minutes per game. So he's averaging 1.24 fantasy points per minute. So it's a back-to-back, but it doesn't matter. He only played 26 minutes last game. He doesn't need to be out there long to score his fantasy points and reach 5 times value or more. And if they do find themselves in a close game or overtime, or if this guy gets 30 minutes or more, he will probably crush value, and he's got some monster upside. So I really like this play. So he's projected at 42.1 fantasy points here tonight. I think that projection might be a little bit high, but it's not really if you look at his last 3 games. But if he does score that, that's 6.8 times value. So he's only 6,200 DraftKings salary. Now he's 2,300 more on FanDuel. So you can see he is drastically underpriced here on DraftKings. So I do think there's some value to be had from Jacob Piotr here on DraftKings. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 214.5 points scored in this game. So I think that's part of it. Vegas thinks this is going to be a low-scoring game. It is a back-to-back. But I am certainly going to be playing Jacob Piotr, who has scored 39, 56, and 57 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 26, 30, and 36 minutes. So I think he is just drastically underpriced here on DraftKings. And Jacob Piotr scored 32, 28, 15, and 31 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I do think he's in a fantastic spot here tonight. Despite the back-to-back and the bad matchup, if he's just out there for those minutes, he's going to find a way to get that production, averaging the 1.24 fantasy points per minute on the court. So I like Jacob Piotr, especially, and probably only on DraftKings. I think he is a smash DraftKings play here versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. So there is another value play, a super low salary play here at the center position. Take a look at Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Sacramento Kings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They've been good versus opposing centers. Now, Jalen Williams has averaged 15 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 17 minutes per game, but you'll see in a second, those minutes in that production are way up the last 3 games. He's been averaging a 14% usage rate, so he's projected at 23.5 fantasy points here tonight, and I think that is certainly reasonable, and that's 6.9 times value. He's only 3,400 DraftKings salary. He's 1,600 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 241 points scored in this game. Great game to stack, tons of value. So Jalen Williams has scored 26, 22, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 26, 26, and 25 minutes. So that is fantastic minutes and production for his price point. He definitely has the opportunity here to smash this slate. If he can score 23 fantasy points or more, that's almost 7 times value or more. That's what you want for your players. So I like Jalen Williams here versus the Sacramento Kings.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.